There was no take 5 for 8.8. You are continuing reading your documents having to do with peace for our time and Prime Minister of Great Britain Neville Chamberlain negotiating with Hitler about the Sudetenland and what was going to happen there. So as a result of those September 1938 meetings, and document 4 for you was the Munich Agreement. So the result is Chamberlain and Hitler agree that Germany can take the Sudetenland, that mountainous border territory of Czechoslovakia. Hitler can take that because Germans are living in that region. And again, the idea of Blut und Boden. If the people who live there have German blood, then the land should also be German. And Hitler wants that Lebensraum. He wants that living space because Germany had lost so much territory after the First World War. The caveat, or the part that Hitler must agree to, is, okay, once I have Sudetenland, that's it. I won't take anything else. I'll be satisfied with that. And this, what happens here, is called appeasement. Because Chamberlain, he's giving Hitler something he wants in the promise, or in the hopes that that will end the crisis. It's to assuage someone, or the dictionary says it's to bring a state of peace, of quiet, ease, or calm, or to satisfy or relieve, or to yield or concede to belligerent demands. So in this case, it's yielding to Hitler's demands, because Hitler was a bully. But remember that everyone, Europe, was just terrified of another world war, and you can see why they would want to do whatever they could to avoid war. So that's why at the Munich Agreement, they decided that they will allow Hitler and Nazi Germany to take the Sudetenland. So Hitler will do that on October 1st, 1938. German tanks roll into the Sudetenland. Remember, it was mostly ethnic Germans, and so those Germans are quite happy. They are thrilled to be seeing sort of their nationality to be reunified with Germany. And so that takes us through the end of 1938. Then document 6 in the packet was Time Magazine's Man of the Year for 1938. It was published in January of 1939, looking back on the previous year, who was the most important man. And they select Hitler. And we read part of the article in class, and you read it on your own, and it becomes very clear that even with Hitler taking only the Sudetenland, that he has malicious intent, that he has taken so much power, and the world has done almost nothing. If you look at Munich, the world actually gives in to him because he's a bully. So it's not that the world was completely unaware of Hitler's intent and Hitler's methods. Just as the pattern has been, Hitler acts, and then he takes a few months to think and to plan for what's next, and what's next is the rest of Czechoslovakia. And this is a very famous photograph when the German tanks are rolling in, and these Czechoslovakians are now, you can see she's in her traditional Czech dress. Czechoslovakia, this country that gained its independence after the Treaty of Versailles, now belongs to Germany. So when Hitler takes Czechoslovakia, he controls the royal palace in Prague, and this is far more than Lebensraum. This is far more than Blut und Boden. This is a world takeover. So if you want to watch, there's a funny clip from Comedy Central of Little Hitler, and it's a comedic version of Hitler's progression of aggression. Again, waiting a few months, so March 1939, he takes the rest of Czechoslovakia, and then the next thing is in August of 1939. This is the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. Molotov and Ribbentrop were the two foreign ministers of the Soviet Union and Germany. So Molotov is the Russian, Ribbentrop is the German. And fun fact, Molotov cocktails, the weapon, were named after this foreign minister when the Russians tried to take over Finland, and the poor civilians are creating their own sort of handmade bombs. What this pact says, because you have to remember, Germany and Russia are on opposite ends of the political spectrum. Fascism is very different from communism. We saw that tension in the Spanish Civil War. So Hitler and Stalin do not like each other. But they come to an agreement, their countries come to an agreement that they won't fight, and they both want Poland, so rather than fighting over Poland, they'll just split it up. And this was a political cartoon from August 39. Wonder how long the honeymoon will last. And the whole world's sort of pondering, okay, they've been talking about how they hate each other for so long. Why? Why on earth would these two groups that hate each other come to this friendly agreement? We're not going to fight. We don't want to fight. We're just going to split up the territory we want, and we'll leave everything else alone. So think back to the First World War. What was the problem that Germany had? They knew they were surrounded. Germany in 1939 doesn't want to be surrounded. They know that Britain and France are opposing them. They don't want to also end up in a war against Russia. So the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact is a way to avoid a two-front war. Again, history is rhyming again. So they've made this agreement in August 1939 about what will happen to Poland. That brings us to September 1939. When the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact is made public, both Britain and France step forward and say, okay, this is unacceptable. We understood the Rhineland. We understood Austria. We even, to a certain extent, understood the Sudetenland. But then Hitler took Czechoslovakia and is now clearly intending to take Poland. And this is not acceptable. So both Britain and France say that if Germany crosses the border into Poland, if Germany invades Poland, then Britain and France will declare war. So Hitler crosses the border on September 1st, 1939. Now it's in red because for me, this is what I consider the beginning of the Second World War. I said at the beginning of this unit, there's many dates that historians point to as the beginning of this world war. You could say the Spanish Civil War in 1936. You could talk about tensions between Japan and Russia in the mid-1930s. But for our purposes, for a European class, we're going to say that September 1st, 1939 is the beginning of this war. And the way Germany invades, it is different because they are using different technology and different tactics. Specifically, the tactic is called blitzkrieg. Literal translation of that means lightning war. If you think back to World War I, invasions and troop movements were slow and there was a lot of stalemate. Blitzkrieg is the absolute opposite. It is about speed. It is about catching them off guard. It is using tanks and planes. So it is all about this improved technology and using speed to quickly take over a territory. And in about a day, Poland now is split between Germany and the Soviet Union. And so now, Britain and France said, if you invade Poland, we'll go to war. And so Britain and France declare war on Germany. And so this clip, if you look over on canvas to the right, this is a clip from the movie The King's Speech. And King George VI of England, who is current Queen Elizabeth II's father, he had been the second son. He was never intended to be king, and his elder brother abdicates. And so George is forced to take the throne, and he had a speech impediment. And he has to get speech therapy to learn how to speak confidently. And it will be very important during this war that the British can look to their leader. And so this was the speech that he made, and this is the movie version of that speech, that he made in September of 1939. And he speaks about, for the second time in the lives of most of us, we are at war. And so this was a terrifying prospect. So take a look at that video clip if you like. So in September 1939, everyone's declared war. Britain and France have declared war on Germany. However, for about 8 months, nobody does anything. It gets the nickname the Phony War because nobody does anything. There's no troop movements. There's no battles. And so jokingly, it is called Sitzkrieg because everyone's just sitting around waiting. Now, why are they waiting? Why, if they've declared war, why don't they act upon it? Because they're terrified. They still remember the First World War. They remember the damage, the psychological and physical and emotional and economic damage that war caused. And so they're almost hoping that they can avoid it, but they need to prepare. So one way they can prepare is through propaganda. It is it is important that not only does the military get prepared for war, but that the civilians get prepared for war. Because if you remember Guernica was an attack on civilians, and one issue of this war will be attacks on civilians. So here we have a great example reminding British citizens to always carry your gas mask. By 1939, 1940, all the British citizens had a gas mask with them at all times. They were expecting the Luftwaffe, the German Air Force, this newer technology, to go back to using gas attacks that they remembered from the First World War. Then in spring of 1940, as the country is gearing up for war, the country is a little nervous. They don't feel that their military is prepared, so they're going to look to someone with a history in the military, someone who had served as Lord of the Admiralty, and they will choose Winston Churchill once again to come back as First Lord of the Admiralty. And the telegram is sent to the entire naval fleet that Winston is back. And this gave the British people a little bit of a boost. They knew Winston, they knew his person, they knew his experience with war. So if he's going to be in a position of power in the military, that's going to give the people confidence. And they're going to need that to carry through with this war. So then we come to April 1940. Once again, Hitler acts. He takes a few months to rest up, to think, to plan his next action. So we've got the Rhineland, Austria, Sudetenland, Czechoslovakia, Poland, and now we're circling back counterclockwise to Denmark and Norway. And the Danish and the Norwegians, they knew this was coming. They had seen the pattern, and they were in a way prepared. They knew that they couldn't fight back. Militarily, they wouldn't be able to defeat Hitler. But they did as much as they can to make it difficult for Hitler. So, for example, the Danish Navy, the King of Denmark, decides to blow up his entire navy. He has all of the sailors evacuate the ships, and he blows up the navy so that Hitler is unable to use those ships for his purposes. By this point, Hitler is picking up speed. He doesn't need time to regroup or to figure out his next move. He knows exactly what his next move will be in May of 1940. And this is when he invades the Netherlands, Belgium, and France. So again, like I said, he's making that counterclockwise spiral. He gets to France through Belgium, so the Maginot Line is completely pointless. Again, just like in 1914, the French knew what was coming. They were prepared. They had assistance from the British, so there were British troops on the ground in May 1940. And as the Nazis start pouring into France, the British soon realize that they are outnumbered. And they retreat to the city of Dunkirk, located on the coast. So you can see there you have all these Nazi troops. The British are completely outnumbered because they have a fairly small professional army as of 1940. And the British troops have two choices. They can stay on the beach and, get obliterated by the Germans, or they can jump in the water. And the British choose. They jump into the English Channel. They try and use logs for flotation devices. And the British government calls on every civilian vessel, every military vessel as well, but every civilian, every fishing boat, every pleasure cruiser. They say, we need your help. We need to go save our boy. So we have over 340,000 British soldiers who make it across the English Channel in May of 1940. Yes, they are retreating, but it means that they're living to fight another day. And it's called the Miracle at Dunkirk, just like the Miracle at the Marne, where we have the civilians intervening. Churchill famously said that wars aren't won by retreating. But this was very important for the British, that because of the lives saved at Dunkirk, they weren't killed by the Germans, that these soldiers would make up this new professional British army that would live to fight the Germans another day. So the French really did put up a fight. However, in June of 1940, the French do surrender. They realize that they are simply outnumbered. They will not be able to defeat the Germans. What's interesting about what happens with France is it actually splits into two countries at this point. In the north, this is the part of the country that refused to surrender and then is taken over and occupied, so it is German controlled. In the south, it is called Vichy France. It is free because they are agreeing to cooperate. Vichy France is led by General Pétain, who was the general at Verdun, the man who saw attrition, who saw how horrendous war could be between Germany and France, and he wants to avoid that at all costs. So he agrees to cooperate. So now in France, we have essentially two separate countries. We have a relatively free, no, very few restrictions at all in the free zone in Vichy France, and in the occupied zone, completely occupied by Nazi Germany. And so this is the completion of the progression of aggression. All that's left is Britain. They are the only ones who really haven't been conquered or haven't been involved in one way or another. So if you want, watch the clip that is labeled "Springtime for Hitler." It's from the musical The Producers, and the premise of this movie and this musical is to create the worst play, the worst musical in the history of musicals. And they decide to create one about Hitler. And this is the big number, and it's actually historically accurate. So if you take a look, you'll notice things about Czechoslovakia and France and Poland and all of Hitler's progression of aggression.